Good morning. On behalf of Minneapolis College, the Minneapolis College Foundation Board, the Equity and Inclusion Division, the Office of Student Life, and all those who have helped to make this virtual gathering possible, I want to welcome you to our annual Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Celebration and Engagement. My name is Dr. Charles Watson. I am the Program Coordinator for African American Education Empowerment, and I am the chairperson for the Planning and Programming Committee responsible for today's event. I am here to express our deepest gratitude for your attendance at this year's virtual program. Our viewership includes a local, regional, and even national audience. Under different circumstances, we would love the opportunity to host you on our beautiful downtown campus. We miss the joy of our usual face-to-face gathering, but we are ever so grateful for your willingness to invite us into your classrooms, living rooms, and office spaces. While we may be physically separated, we are spiritually together in remembrance of the life and legacy of Dr. King. We hope that you enjoyed our opening compilation of urban artifacts. They represent images of tragedy and triumph, protest and uplift scattered throughout our beloved city. We invite you to travel to these urban monuments and utilize the Community Unity Vigil Guide that can be found on the Equity and Inclusion page of our website. We have a wonderful program for you today. We have remarks of welcome and encouragement from our distinguished president, Dr. Sharon Pierce, followed by a greeting and call to engagement from the Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Human Rights, Rebecca Lucero, and then an unveiling of our new Bridging the Equity Gaps initiative by Beverly Wadsworth, Director of Institutional Advancement. After that, I'll return for a word on nonviolent direct action, but only as a prelude or appetizer before our centerpiece activity, a showcase of student winners from our Racial Justice Oratorical Contest, and a special reflection from the award-winning author and Yale scholar, Claudia Rankin. So, we want you to sit back and enjoy the show as we honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on this day of celebration and engagement.
Welcome to Minneapolis College's annual celebration of the work of the great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I'm honored to join you in reflecting on how Dr. King's work so many years ago remains relevant to the work we so desperately need to focus on together as a community in the wake of an incredibly challenging year. To maintain COVID-19 safety protocols, our event this year is being provided completely through an online experience. We hope next year's event will allow us to once again bring community members together to do service projects, engage with speakers and each other, and join in a face-to-face celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Today, I would like to focus our attention on what may be the most well-known King quote of all. Dr. King delivered a moving message about freedom, jobs, and the need for change as he led the August 1963 March on Washington. He said, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." The future Dr. King envisioned for his 4 little children has fallen short of his dream. Bernice, Dexter, and Martin King are now in their middle-age years, and sadly, Yolanda King has passed away. This April 4th marks the 53rd year since Dr. King's passing at age 39. We all know the indelible strides his movement made toward achieving equality for all in America. However, as I reflect on the awakening our world experienced this summer, sparked by the death of George Floyd, I have to consider the strides we still need to make to help bring about the world of equality of which Dr. King dreamed. 58 years after Dr. King shared his dream with the world, do we now live in a nation where children are not judged by the color of their skin, but rather by the content of their character? Tragically, we know the answer to this question is no, we do not. The vigorous enforcement of civil rights laws brought an end to segregated public facilities, but these enforceable obligations did not bring an end to fears and prejudice because laws and policies, good or bad, are the bare minimum. Last summer, Minneapolis College boldly proclaimed its commitment to becoming an anti-racist institution through our equity statement. This public reaffirmation of our promise to commit ourselves to change today's world paves the way forward to create an equitable future for tomorrow's children. It's our turn to make progress on the journey Dr. King invited all Americans to join. Together, we will work to fulfill our mission to provide transformational educational experiences to help elevate the socioeconomic status of our community, family, friends, and neighbors. By achieving this mission, we will reduce the racial divide experienced across our city and in turn across the state and the nation. We won't forget the pain we have endured, but rather we will use it to guide the changes that are needed. During today's event, you will hear the voices of students. These leaders of tomorrow have inherited a significant workload to see social justice become a reality. In their words, you will see a way forward that upholds and cherishes our beloved community. They will speak of committed altruism, unenforceable obligations, and they will challenge us to move beyond the bare minimum. As you experience the celebration today, I ask that you look for ways you can contribute to the work that must be done to remove barriers to equity and justice. Dr. King's long dedication to equality is just as relevant today as it was during the peak of the movement he led. Thank you for joining us to honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his work. And thank you for doing all you can to help ensure another 58 years does not pass without significant systemic changes being made to guarantee a future where children and adults in this country are judged by the content of their character rather than the color of their skin. I promise you an enlightening event today as we celebrate Dr. King, and I invite you to join in creating the equitable and just future he dared to dream of. Finally, in the words of Dr. King, let us hope that the dark clouds of racial prejudice will soon pass away and the deep fog of misunderstanding will be lifted from our fear-drenched communities. And in some not too distant tomorrow, the radiant stars of love and brotherhood will shine over our great nation with all their scintillating beauty. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me to celebrate with you today to honor and build on the legacy of Dr. King. I want to begin by sharing one of my favorite Dr. King quotes with you. So as he embarked on his Poor People's Campaign, Dr. King said, "We are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied into a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." Dr. King wanted us to know that we are made stronger through the simple recognition that we are interconnected and interdependent. We need one another. We need one another to carry on the work that Dr. King fought for, to make real change, to dismantle racism, and to build a beloved community. Now, we're in a country that is founded on white supremacy, from African enslavement to Native boarding schools, Japanese internment, beating and mocking my grandma for speaking Spanish, and mass incarceration of people of color, especially Black and brown men. We're in a state that has some of the worst racial disparities and inequities in the country. This is true when it comes to everything, to education, to housing, to mental health, employment, the legal system. And we know that COVID-19 has deeply exacerbated these disparities. We are also in a city here in Minneapolis where a police officer knelt on the neck of Mr. Floyd, killing him. What communities of color and Indigenous communities are facing today is the direct result of 400 years of intentional decisions to create and sustain systems, policies, and processes that have resulted time and time again in systemic discrimination and oppression. Racism is a harmful system that needs to be addressed, and quite frankly, it's a system that never rests, it never takes a break. So, under these racist systems, it's going to take a long time. A lot of people have been fighting for this for a long time, and it's going to take all of us. Change always does. Dr. King believed that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. He actively worked to build a beloved community that embraces justice and love. He actively worked to end racism and poverty. He actively worked to build a community we can thrive in. Dr. King knew change was possible. And in this past year, we've seen change unfold here as well. So following the death of Mr. Floyd, our department announced the Minneapolis Police Department would make immediate changes after we filed an emergency court order. One of those changes included the city of Minneapolis banning chokeholds. Last year, the Minnesota House passed the Crown Act with overwhelming bipartisan support after powerful community testimony. The Crown Act would explicitly prohibit discrimination based on natural hairstyles such as braids, locks, twists, and knots. And last year we also celebrated the Supreme Court's decision that affirms that discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity is illegal. There's countless other examples of change unfolding. And I just want to take a minute to express my sincere gratitude and thank you to every single one of you that is doing this work every single day. It is absolutely going to take all of us to keep moving forward. Now, for those of you who might not know about the Minnesota Department of Human Rights, we are the state's civil rights enforcement agency. We enforce the Minnesota Human Rights Act. It's one of the strongest and most comprehensive civil rights laws in the country. We have done so for more than 53 years. Now, the state law powerfully states, discrimination threatens the rights and privileges of the inhabitants of this state and menaces the institutions and foundations of democracy. There's powerful words that are embedded directly into the statute itself. Specifically, the statute prohibits discrimination based on different identities, such as race, disability, and age, and it prevents it in all areas, such as education, employment, and housing. Now, Minnesota has a strong civil rights agency that you can turn to if you're experiencing discrimination, because we know that racism, transphobia, sexism, xenophobia, ableism, anti-Semitism, and Islamophobia will continue to be persistent and pervasive in our community. They are designed to work this way. The systems have been created to work this way. That's why we must move beyond only holding a ceremony or making a public statement, but really look to Dr. King and be inspired to do the hard and necessary work to rethink and implement policies that bring about real justice, real equity, real inclusion. And this will require building community because no one can do it alone, as we keep mentioning here. So when you're doing your work, you are doing it with others who have a deep appreciation for intersectionality, a deep appreciation for the trauma and the pain that many of us are carrying within us. And of course, you're doing this with community that celebrates the joy and all of the good change as this arc towards justice continues to bend. So build community with folks that see you, that see all of us, that see you as a beautiful, complex being who holds multiple identities. So MLK holiday, Dr. King holiday takes place on January 18th every year, but Dr. King's legacy for justice and love and his work to end racism and poverty is a fitting and necessary discussion for any day. So thank you again for having me, and happy Dr. King Day, and happy birthday, Dr. King.
We are announcing a new initiative called Bridging the Equity Gap. While this initiative was underway early in 2020, the social justice movement and tragic death of George Floyd helped to shape it. Bridging the Equity Gap will help us reach, educate, and cultivate future leaders who identify as African American, Black, or American Indian. We'll do this through an affirming, learning-centered cohort experience in which students are equipped with the tools that encourage them to see the greatness in themselves as well as in the experiences of others. Students participating in this cohort will be provided supportive faculty, staff, and student-centered services and resources. They will be equipped with the information, backing, and interventions needed to attain their education, achieve their career goals, and become leaders in their fields. Bridging the Equity Gap students will receive academic support and coaching. They will receive cohort-based learning, peer reinforcement, mentoring, and financial assistance. The initiative will support students who wish to earn either a certificate or a degree or a diploma from Minneapolis College. Whether a student's goal is to master trade skills or to significantly improve their chances of entering and excelling at a four-year college, this cohort will develop the whole person and equip them with leadership competencies and cultural fluency essential for the 21st century. We believe eliminating equity gaps in educational outcomes is an essential path forward to a more equitable and just community for all of us. Over the next 5 years, we aspire to raise $2 million to fund this initiative. And well, after just 5 months, we're really off to a great start. Generous donors have already stepped up and committed more than $530,000 to this effort. So today I'm asking you to help us bridge the equity gap. Your contributions of time, talent, and treasure truly are the force of change. Your generosity and commitment to this effort will determine the success of our students and the impact our graduates have in our community now and for years to come. I'm joined by one of our neighbors from right here in Loring Park, Marcia Sullivan. Marcia has agreed to join us today to share a little bit about her involvement with Minneapolis College.
I was working in Washington, D.C. the summer of 1963, and it is one of the regrets of my life that I allowed others to discourage me from attending Martin Luther King's speech at the mall. I heard his message, however, and I think it's important for us to continue to review his vision, and hopefully one day his dream will be reality and not just a vision.
Would you tell us a little bit about how you got connected to Minneapolis College and what encourages you and inspires you to support the college and our students?
When my husband and I moved back to Minnesota after being away for 40 years, I set out to discover what I could about Minneapolis College. I think the community college system is an important part of our educational program in the United States and will increasingly be so as the economy dictates. In 2016, as in 2020, the presidential election was very close and full of anger. It was apparent that we weren't hearing what each other was saying. Why were so many people struggling while others were doing so well? To my husband and I, we've always thought education was the key to the future success of a person. My sister and I were the first ones in our family to go to college, and we have the opportunities that my parents did not have. So now I want to help other students have those same benefits of a higher education. And Bridging the Equity Gap initiative seems to be designed to help others reach that goal. So I've chosen to support that effort.
How and why do you feel Minneapolis College is well positioned to be part of the solution to bridging the equity gap?
The numbers indicate that here in Minneapolis, we've not provided an equal education for all of our students. Bridging the Equity Gap initiative is designed to equalize, to agree, the effort we make for the students who have been underserved or marginalized. As you shared earlier, Beverly, Minneapolis College has several programs that assist students with educational dollars and mentoring. But tuition is not the only bill that needs to be paid when trying to get an education. There are books and lab fees, yes, but also food, transportation, and living expenses. Jobs help with those bills, but jobs can be hard to come by, and the more hours on the job, the less time for focusing on studies.
And specifically, how does this initiative, in your mind, become part of the solution to the broader challenges you mentioned?
Bridging the Equity Gap initiative gives students the extra funds and mentoring needed to make the most of the educational offerings here at Minneapolis College when the student is ready to make the most of the college opportunity. If more of our students have the skills to be successful in a fulfilling role in society, we all win. Students can complete their program with the Minneapolis College or become prepared to move on to complete their educational program elsewhere with little or no debt. That takes a load off their shoulders.
Is there anything else that you would like to talk to us about today?
One of my neighbors said that the best thing about our neighborhood, living right here, was location, location, location. She meant shopping, restaurants, theater, and the transportation system to get where you wanted to go. Minneapolis College has all those advantages, plus they have a wide variety of educational programs, the basic math, science, and English, plus building trades, nursing and health sciences, early childhood education, and the School of Design and the Arts. I was impressed by the physical facilities for the programs, the student areas, and of course the cafeteria. When I came to the Power of You breakfast, I felt the warmth of the staff and their connection with the students. I met with some of the students and heard the diversity of their experiences. All of this makes for a very enriching program and experience for the life ahead.
What does it mean to claim that we are all MLK? A dramatic but not entirely far-fetched answer would best underscore the sought-after family resemblance. In comparison to Martin Luther King Jr., I possess an identical endowment and the same inheritance of capacity. I share the same purpose and pursuit of equivalent goals. Our convictions are interchangeable, our principles are synonymous, our methods are indistinguishable. But if I mirror Dr. King and you too are his twin, then we must also have a connection, a relationship mediated by lessons learned from his extraordinary example. We are all MLK to the extent that we have neither abandoned the activity of dreaming nor forsaken the content of Dr. King's dream. Beloved community is the content of King's dream. If we are truly all MLK, we must contend with three questions, paying close attention to the overlap or correspondence between the roots of Dr. King's answers and the fruits of our daily actions. The questions are, what is beloved community? Why should it be endorsed as the desirable end goal of our collective striving, and how is it achieved, or by what method is it reached? In Stride Toward Freedom, Dr. King states, quote, "Our ultimate goal is integration, which is genuine intergroup and interpersonal living. Only through nonviolence can this goal be attained. For the aftermath of nonviolence is reconciliation and the creation of the beloved community," end quote. How we fight is as important as that for which we fight. The end we seek must be illustrated by and illuminated through the means we employ. To dismantle barriers hampering its realization and establish environments that make beloved community possible, we must enlist the way of creative protest. Creative protest works to eliminate systems and forces that prohibit equal access to the well springs of justice, freedom, and opportunity. But this disciplined approach is predicated upon a working faith in the transformative power of soul force, non-injury, and love. A method of nonviolence, creative protest projects an ethic of love into the center of our lives, harnessing a force that works for togetherness and works to bring the disconnected aspects of reality into a harmonious whole? How can we serve as light, seeking to bring inequities and disparity gaps out from concealment, heeding the call to action expressed by a neighbor's cry of need, while leading as trailblazers who illuminate direction and goal? How will we react emotionally and respond socially when faced with the reality of unjust conditions? Is conscience calling answered by a tone of busy? What proves the workings of a moral compass? Will bystanders awaken from apathy to action? Creative protest arouses moral conscience and elicits moral shame. Creative protest confronts intolerable conditions and articulates legitimate grievances. Creative protest refuses complicity with evil and demands prophecies of change be fulfilled. Creative protest motivates a togetherness campaign of backbones lifting in lockstep defiantly. The way of creative protest is a nonviolent strategy for everyday resistance. I mean everyday in both the sense of routine or regular activity and mundane or commonplace acts. I want to leave you with a simple recipe for everyday resistance. There are 6 ingredients to creative protest. The active yeast of soul force universalism, the bread flour of love, the oil of obedience to unenforceable obligations, the warming water of non-injury, the sugar of neighborly altruism, and the salt of maladjustment or non-cooperation with structures of oppression. Soul force universalism is the understanding that all life is interrelated and every person is heir to a legacy of dignity and worth. As Dr. King states, quote, "The self cannot be self without other selves. I cannot reach fulfillment without you. All are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." In the final analysis, I must not ignore the wounded person on life's Jericho road because they are a part of me and I am a part of them. Their agony diminishes me and their salvation enlarges me, end quote. Soul force universalism recognizes that innate worth is universally shared in equal portions by all persons, ally and adversary alike. We affirm our dignity when we respect the worth of all human personality, and violence stands diametrically opposed to this sacred assertion of interrelatedness. Quote, "At the center of nonviolence stands the principle of love. It is a love in which the individual seeks not their own good, but the good of their neighbor. It begins by loving others for their sakes. It is an entirely neighbor-regarding concern for others, which discovers the neighbor in every person it meets. Therefore, agape makes no distinction between friends and enemy. It is directed toward both," writes Dr. King. Coercion and compulsion deny such other-oriented regard, whereas conversation and persuasion depend upon it, as do the categories honored by today's racial justice oratorical contest. The judges and winners are shining examples of creative protest. According to Dr. King, the ultimate solution to the race problem lies in the willingness of people to obey unenforceable obligations. Something must touch the hearts and souls of people so that they will come together spiritually because it is natural and right. I sincerely hope that your hearts are moved to compassion and your handy feet to action by the gifted minds, talented pens, and loving voices of our award-winning students and the judges who selected them.
Well, I had the honor of being one of the judges on this MLK essay contest, and I'm happy to announce that Sadman Mahir won for Best Argument. Now, I'd like us to pause and consider a question. What is the value of a good argument in the face of racial violence? When a police officer has their knee on your neck, when a judge or a jury or even your own attorney don't believe you, when academic institutions have no space for your culture, your identity, or religion, or corporations exploit your body by people that you can't even talk to. In other words, why should arguments matter in a society where Black lives don't? Now, each of us have to wrestle with that for ourselves. I'm comforted by history, where Black and Indigenous and people of color have been making good arguments for a very long time. And I think that Sadman's essay joins that history. His argument includes persuasive, thoughtful, and careful use of language and imagery. And the best thing about it is that his conclusion cannot be ignored. If you value the life behind that essay, white people, we cannot ignore Sadman's call to be involved in anti-racist work and understand our place in it. Now, I know that Sadman is a filmmaker. He's in our studio arts program. He's a musician, a songwriter. So he will be hopefully making good arguments, not just in essay, but in film and in media and in song, here in the States, in his home, Bangladesh, and, who knows where else. The question is, are we listening? Congratulations, Sadman.
You and I are MLK. There's no denying the fact that race issues are still very prevalent in the United States. We have come a long way. The progress is apparent, but is slow and riddled with active backlash and new obstacles surfacing every day. Problems that should clearly be addressed day in, day out are left ignored, if not aggressively dealt with when addressed. Some are constantly battling to change the ways in which racism is rooted within the foundation of our society, while certain others are constantly battling to just live a life free of fear and dread. As a country, we must come together in tearing down these deep-rooted power structures. In the words of Martin Luther King Jr., what is needed today on the part of white America is a committed altruism which recognizes this truth, that is, the Negro's agony diminishes the white man, and the Negro's salvation enlarges the white man. Committed altruism means actively and consciously putting others first, especially those in need of help, for the greater good of humanity. It comes from a place of empathy where one puts aside personal gain and is able to walk in another's shoes in order to try to see the reality and gravity of a situation. All it really takes is this willingness to try to do so. As MLK put it, true altruism is more than the capacity to pity. It is the capacity to empathize. Pity is feeling sorry for someone. Empathy is feeling sorry with someone. First and foremost, what must be recognized by all is the reality of Black people in America, that their lives are constantly affected negatively by systematic and institutionalized racism, and that to a degree, they are targeted by the very nature of certain laws. This cannot continue to be the case, and everyone in this country must play a role in diminishing this reality. Empathy is the most powerful tool humans use to uphold community over self. It may not be easy to be an empathetic person. It is often at the cost of one's self-interest or even emotional stability. It is not easy to empathize with a person living through a miserable existence. It is, in fact, overwhelmingly depressing. But it is important to remember, we do not deserve happiness until everybody does. The easiest way to live life, especially as someone in a place of privilege, is by turning a blind eye to what they're not directly affected by. This is obviously no way to achieve progress. An altruist would treat somebody else's serious matter as their own. The racism issue in this country is everybody's to face and challenge. Black peoples of this nation have had to make strides for centuries to be safe, only to face new updated obstacles. The least an ally can and should do is help make it easier along the way, as racist power structures are addressed and attempted to be dismantled. How? By being there, listening, and just deeply caring for one another in general. Humans must always strive for interconnection. It is the very quality that has helped us become the highly evolved species we are today. We cannot keep turning our backs on fellow humans. One person's sadness is the sadness of everyone. Unfortunately, the sadness must transform into rage as the number of Black lives lost to police brutality continue to grow. The anger and frustration that had long been boiling must continue to be let out. But even with these unpleasant circumstances, there is some room for celebration. Black Lives Matter protesters as an organization standing up strong against those that oppress them despite the hardships and utter lack of safety in doing so need to be celebrated. Seeing the streets of Minneapolis post George Floyd's killing was an eye-opener. Hundreds of thousands of people flocking together to the streets all over the nation to demand change is definitely something to be celebrated. From my personal experience having attended some of the protests, one of the most striking imageries I remember is one where white allies of the movement literally shielded people of color from law enforcement aggressions. The fact that this method works in terms of deterring a certain amount of extra force is depressing in and of itself, but also the fact that these allies are doing so, putting their safety on the line to save those who are more at risk at the hands of aggressors, needs to be celebrated as a milestone for understanding where we all stand. It speaks volumes on how far we have come as a community that recognizes the power structures at play. Examples such as these show how much power interconnection holds in paving the way to a future possibly free of racial injustice. More and more people with privilege must strive to be committed altruists who are willing to fight the biased systems alongside those who do not have a choice not to. There is really no simpler way to put this. If you want to actively be a good person, which does require more than lacking malicious intent, then choose to be an empathetic altruist wherever and whenever possible. The world is a strange place where wealth and status are more often than not held in higher regard than the well-being of fellow humans, and we must do our best to break away from this awful norm. Together, we must address the issues at their roots and dismantle the power structures. All of us are responsible for ensuring a future that holds all people as equals. The journey there will continue to be full of interruptions and distractions, and the ultimate result may seem a very uncertain one, but we must give it our best shot as one. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Ramona Harristhal of the Minneapolis College Foundation Board. I'm honored to present our Best Researched Award. Research is key to almost everything we do. We succeed in life when we know the truth. Research allows us to confirm reality and refute lies. Through research, we build our understanding of topics, we learn to assess their breadth and depth, and we become aware of and grasp their complexities. Our Best Researched Award winner is Jesse Escobar. Jesse is working toward a dental office support certificate and hopes to work in cybersecurity in the future. He grew up in a diverse community which fostered his inner attitudes of respect and compassionate concern for others. Jesse's essay supports our understanding of two key concepts of the Dr. King quote on which our contest was based: committed altruism and unenforceable obligations. Jesse examines current social wrongs. He dares us to examine our thoughts and feelings about injustice by offering views of current and past activists. Through an array of researched opinions, we hope Jesse's essay will encourage your own thoughts and investigation of these important issues. Congratulations, Jesse, on a job very well done.
Committed altruism. The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy defines altruism as behavior motivated by the desire to benefit someone other than oneself for that person's sake. Being committed means feeling dedication and loyalty to a cause. There is limited information when researching the topic, and that is because some people ask themselves if it is even possible. I came across the term egoist and how if you were to do something to benefit someone else, an egoist could come in and say that you only did it to soothe your conscience. Just like any other controversial topic, people would have doubts when it came to good deeds and if they are done for personal gain. In a world where people would pay it forward without people questioning us, committed altruism would be the ultimate solution to the race problem. People would do behavior directed toward benefiting someone other than oneself. Altruism reminds me of equality and equity in the sense that you would do it because it benefits someone other than oneself. It is the perfect solution because it would mean unity within all our brothers and sisters on earth. True altruism is more than the capacity to pity. It is the capacity to empathize. Mr. King could have not explained it any better. People need to do things out of empathy, and not just out of pity. With a quote we were given, compassion could be used to define unenforceable obligations. Unenforceable obligations are a set of laws we must create all on our own. Every human has an amazing ability to assess their own conscience and the morals they face in their lives. Living life and unenforceable laws we are given growing up is how people become aware of empathy and where they experience it. There are some things that are situational, and we all hope people are being taught the correct things and feelings towards other people. Living life and connecting with one another and learning to be sensitive to others' feelings and thoughts is how we can tie together interconnection and empathy. They are all related because with interconnection and empathy, we can create a set of obligations we follow and erect pillars of laws. I like to think of unenforceable obligations the way we think of normal obligations in everyday life. Laws are set to create order in society and its aspects. If you were to run a red light and run into someone and their family, that could risk their life or end it that very second. The loss would impact the life of all their loved ones and, of course, the person who had experienced it themselves. Trauma could be created for the rest of their lives, and hate could be created towards the person who chose not to follow the laws. Laws are set to protect people from harm and from injustice. If you were to go ahead and treat someone with injustice due to looking different or coming from a different country or culture, that would be like running a red light. It might not affect your life at all, but to them it might be a traumatic experience. Things we do not understand turn into hate. Someone will look at this racial injustice and not understand it, and in turn, make it hate towards a group of people or a single individual. This would rewrite the laws we created for one another and ruin any chances of hope to abolish this cycle of injustice. Ben Crump, a lawyer for justice, stated that systematic injustice and racism have deep historical roots in this country. He talks about how these practices and ways of thinking have persisted over centuries and continue to happen. He talks about a subject I was going to get into, and it is a great example of something that is happening currently. Some contemporary examples are the wrongful deaths of our brothers and sisters who had to go through tragic racial injustices of today. America was outraged at the deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Daniel Prude, Rayshard Brooke, and far too many other innocent victims of racial injustice. Far too many lives have been taken by racial injustice, and I am hopeful that people are starting to stand for those who need their voices heard or amplified. Some might argue that riots are a wrong way to approach being heard, but I stand here and totally disagree from the simple fact that we are being heard and we know we are being heard. People are angry because of businesses' walls that are being burnt down and demolished, but I am hopeful that the walls of racial injustice are burnt down and demolished along with them. No man, woman, or child should have to experience such a horrible thing. No man, woman, or child should live in fear and duck their heads and go about their day after experiencing such a horrible thing. I am hopeful because we are creating an atmosphere where racism is not tolerated. Just like they created an atmosphere where they thought it was okay, we must create an atmosphere where this behavior is not tolerated. We are creating a youth that uses unenforceable laws to defend those who are mistreated. We are writing unspoken laws where equality and equity are to be obeyed, where altruism is done out of the kindness of their hearts and not out of their pity-filled brains. A place where empathy they have is for others of all cultures, colors, shapes, and sizes of the world.
I'm Deb Pomeroy Coughlin, a member of the Foundation's Board of Directors, proud to announce the winner of this year's MLK's Oratory Contest for the category Most Impassioned. Our winner, Carisha Thomas, comes to us from the small Caribbean island of Grenada, and although she's in her second year toward a business management degree at Minneapolis College, it's actually her love of nature that inspired 2 previous degrees. One in natural science from T.A. Mary Show Community College, and yet another in marine wildlife and conservation biology from St. George's University. And it is this passion that fuels her long-term goal of a master's degree in environmental law and policy, so that she can truly make an impact on environmental laws and practices. So why does passion, why does moving the heart matter? It's too easy, isn't it, in today's society to disengage and distance ourselves, especially from those we see as different. Passion is a powerful force that reminds us of our interconnectedness and propels us out of our complacency. It's a call to action. Carisha's essay entitled Committed Altruism, The Way Forward to Racial Equality in America was a unanimous favorite of the judges as the most moving essay. Carisha uses her voice as a mother, as a human, to connect us to how it feels for her to be a Black mother raising a Black son in this society, how she worries about him, about his future, about all of our futures. She reminds us that empathy happens when we recognize our interconnectedness. Empathy is what encourages us to have honest conversations and to take ownership and responsibility on our collective path to social justice and racial healing together. Carisha, we celebrate you and your words of inspiration today. Congratulations.
Committed altruism, the way forward to racial equality in America. How do I tell my son he has to be vigilant around members of the white race? What do I say to my son to explain to him that because of the color of his skin, he can get shot for wearing a hoodie or playing with a toy gun? These are the conversations I have to think about having with him. Why is it every night while driving home from my job at school, I am petrified of being pulled over by the police? I am a single Black woman raising a little Black boy, and I am terrified for him. I am terrified for myself. Why is it that today, in the supposed age of enlightenment, we are still here at this point of racial injustice and racial inequality? I want my son to grow up in a society that recognizes him for who he is as a person, and not for the color of his skin. I want him to live in a society that understands the struggle that we as Black people have faced in the years of our existence. But how do we get to that point as a society? It begins with honesty about the past and present conditions of society. In order to change and embrace committed altruism, one must educate themselves about and truly understand their part in the racial divide that exists in America. Each person must ask themselves, am I on the wrong or right side? So what exactly is committed altruism? It is a concerted effort to put others first without the thought of gaining something in return. In short, it is a conscious effort of selflessness. And it is the only way to ensure little Black boys and girls like my son grow up in an environment where they do not have to be afraid of a racially biased system. How beautiful it would be to live in a society where we are all considered equal regardless of skin color. This is what committed altruism will result in for this nation. Altruism forces the individual to put aside his personal opinions and biases and refocuses his point of view from his neighbor's perspective. America has become a self-centered society where the individual thinks about how their actions affect themselves rather than how it affects others around them. What if the white man considered the feelings of the Black father who's just trying to get a job to feed his children? How would he feel if he was denied the job he was qualified for simply because of the color of his skin? What if this situation was reversed? Society has never been every race functioning independently. It never will be. Whether we like it or not, we are all interconnected. Society is enriched by our racial and cultural differences. It is not weakened. America is at its strongest when it embraces everyone regardless of race, culture, and creed. America is at its strongest when each individual sees the other as another human being, another member of society, as a neighbor. With that being said, it is imperative that we remind ourselves that we answer to a higher power. Our values and beliefs must be aligned with our actions, and our actions must be in line with our conscience. It is only when this is done will we see those actions that cannot be policed affect society positively. By focusing on putting others first, empathy for the plight of members of our different races come naturally because we have trained ourselves to see one another as mothers, daughters, sisters, fathers, brothers, grandparents, cousins, and not as black or white. It causes us to hold ourselves accountable for our actions to ensure that these said actions do not harm our neighbor, that mother with two sons who happen to be black, or the lonely old man across the street that happens to be Asian. We begin to see personalities and abilities and needs and forget color. As protests spread across the nation in response to the killing of George Floyd, I remember a distinct feeling of optimism and encouragement that there may be some turning point in the ongoing fight for racial equality. It was heartening to see that so many of this generation understood that the fight for racial equality and justice did not just lie on the shoulders of Black people, but the task of achieving the goal of equality for all is the responsibility of everyone that bleeds red. It made me believe that in the future, maybe my little black boy wouldn't have to wonder why the color of his skin is dangerous to walk around in.
Hello, my name is Patrick Troop, and I'm the Vice President of Student Affairs and Interim College Diversity Officer at Minneapolis College. I'm happy to announce that Sebastian Quinn-Mayor as the recipient for the Most Creative Award for his essay entitled, What is Committed Altruism and Why is it the Ultimate Solution to the Race Problem? Sebastian is a first-year graphic design student. One of his biggest ambitions is to make a change, as small or big as it may be, but one that will remain in someone's mind long enough to be remembered. Whether it's through stories or images, he wants to use his voice to express his own thoughts and ideas. As a graphic designer, he can complement his other career, mass communication, so his voice finds a better fit. He was born in Miami, Florida, and was raised in Venezuela. He speaks Spanish, English, and French, and has a crazy passion for philosophy and politics, as well as for the fine arts. I've always believed that creativity is at the core of being human. Creativity often upsets the status quo. Creativity is about making change. By its nature, it's usually directed to improving things. Creativity tends to be disruptive or subversive. Creativity makes the world a better, more beautiful, more friendly place. When you think creatively, you're opening your heart and mind, and you're relating to people as humans. Creativity is an incredibly human thing. When we get too stuck in our heads, we wind up acting in ways that can be harmful. We need to balance that head and heart, and creativity is the link between the two. Sebastian expresses creativity by starting his essay off utilizing scenarios to effectively set up his argument. Sebastian's insights are original, clear, and he showed complexity in his argumentation that you will now see.
Consider a scenario where your life is at risk. You have a 1% chance of leaving there alive, as well as a 99% chance of not leaving at all. That 1% relies on a stranger that you don't know anything about, not his name or her name, family history, passions, thoughts, religious beliefs, or even his or her job. But that person stands between you and death. That person will not get an award for acting upon you. Neither will he or she get money or not even a thank you from you. But that person helps you anyways. Let's change that scenario a little more and say that it's not even you, but a mass of people. And the chances are the same, 1% against 99%. As the previous example, this person stands against the odds, but still acts upon it to help you and your peers, knowing that the effect might or might not work, and knowing that there is no reward. That's what we call altruism on a daily basis. The smallest things can make a change. The most insignificant acts can give light to a dark situation, mostly because most of the time, we don't even consider the effect in hand. We do things for others, relatively tiny or huge, in a natural way, unbeknownst of the result. That commitment to do good is what gives altruism its true name. It's what drives people to give without a return. Even though this might sound as a natural result, many external factors can affect our perspective of things and encourage us to act upon situations that others might not even take in consideration. You wouldn't try to stop something that you don't even know it's happening, or in any case, just ignore at the core, contemplating the black and white areas instead of the many gray areas that exist. So the question arises, how do we commit to be altruistic when it comes to racial injustice? Sadly, relativeness of thought prohibits the idea of an anonymous look at this problem. But we as a whole can always contribute. And the first step is the most important one, recognizing the issue. It is a problem alien to some. However, just like the examples before, it's in our hands to be selfless and give, expecting that the return will be an effective change, not to ourselves, but to those who crave the change they deserve. We are not selfish by nature, but we can always thrive to learn and to know other people's experiences. We can give a hand to the one who needs it. We can speak to the ones who ignore, and we can always be part of the change. It just takes that small step, that small yank of the spirit, to think, I want to help regardless of what happens. There is no obligation upon anybody to do any good outside of the realm of selflessness, as well as there is no obligation to prevent harm done to others, taking it from an exclusively moral perspective. Society moves in a way where selfless acts give a good image in the eyes of the public. We can establish that some people would do these things specifically, originally for a selfish reason. However, the good image comes from the perspective of the majorities, the ones who have a true sense of empathy. This is what drives most people to contribute to what they should alongside to what they have to. The ability to put ourselves in the position of others and understand the struggles and challenges that others face is what gives us the perspective to tell good acts from wrongful ones. There are many ways to develop our empathy and to connect with other people's problems. Yet the first step will always lie in ourselves. We have the power to make a change, to give a voice to the ones unheard, to give feet to the ones who can't walk, to give eyes to the ones who are blinded, and to lift those in the ground. When we look at ourselves being in others' positions, we realize that we do have the obligation to act and to start a change. I see it in the people, those who thrive for change and spread awareness amongst times of injustice. When you see the passion and the commitment to a cause, either small or big, there is a glimpse of hope and a side of change. We've talked about the concepts and the theories behind what happens nowadays and what has happened for many years. Yet we must need to put aside the bigger picture. We must not lose sight of what we want, even though we might never reach it entirely. Small changes can be huge in the bigger picture. And every day there's a new change. There have been many hard times for many people. I have had hard times as a Latino immigrant, as well as many African American people who I've been talking to have let me know about their hard times. I see a change in racial justice in public opinion. We don't see our differences as a disadvantage anymore, but as something to be proud of now. However, things like racial justice are hard work and sadly may not be an absolute reality as soon as we wish. But I'm certain that we are headed to a better direction, leading us towards it.
Hello, my name is Ninette Masagi, and I'm the Director of Equity and Inclusion at Minneapolis College. I'm happy to announce Trevellis Johnson to be the winner of the MLK Racial Justice Oratorical Contest category for the most relevant. Trevellis is a business administration major and member of the Dean's Honor List. He was born to teenage parents and hardworking grandparents, some of whom were the first teachers of color in St. James Parish, Louisiana, others of working class in the shipyards and sugarcane fields. His mother placed great emphasis on his education. Trevellis owns a startup company named Admin's Mind Innovation Firm that is currently working with the Department of Energy to launch an innovative clean energy concept with a subsidiary Afrocentric apparel line. He wrote that he is still confused as how to best express his identity as he traverses a world that has changed little since the days of his grandparents. The issues of race and culture that deferred his progress as a youth will only be overcome by the application of the merits his education and perseverance as a more mature individual. The main reason Trevellis' essay was chosen was because his topic of the history of racism speaks to our time and addresses all people who live in this moment. Specifically, the narrative he wrote of our nation's history in the context that Black history is American history is critical. He shared contributions made by the Black community, profiled inventors, exposed irregularities, systemic racism, and murders all through the past 300 years. Each truth was like it was written today. Time did not matter. Relevancy matters as it can connect hearts and provide hope. Trevellis touched my heart as he was speaking truth through the ages and calls for the urgency of overcoming challenge and finding unity as a people. His sentiment needs to be heard by all Americans. Thank you, Trevellis.
We have to do with the past only as we can make it useful to the present and the future. Frederick Douglass. As a people, we entered in America as an uncompensated labor force, subjected to many atrocities, and was stripped of all cultural identity. The enslavement of a nation was in contradiction to the United States Constitution until January 31st, 1865, on which the 13th Amendment was passed. Despite the ratification of the 13th Amendment, liberation was not obtained. Through decades of perseverance, we overcame systemic circumstances designed maliciously with the intention of preventing former slaves from indulging in the liberties upon which this country was founded. As of this day, as a people, our struggle to be free continues. In the month of February, we pay homage to the struggles and accomplishments of African Americans called Black History. I will question the very language of this title. Are we not Americans? Are not our contributions not American history? A list of historic accomplishments too vast to be confined chronologically in 1 month that will represent the merits of African Americans correctly. Let us journey back into American history. America and NASA sends a man to the moon. a very prominent aspect of American history, also to world history. Only after a movie commemorating the identity of the African American female mathematicians, I became aware of one of the biggest hidden secrets in American history. These great achievers were never mentioned in American history, nor Black History Month, in classes being taught around the nation. Why wasn't they mentioned? Was there an intent to mislead the nation and the world? Yes, to allow the truth to be known would have shattered the stereotype of ignorance placed on African Americans, perpetuated by society of that time in history. Another untold achiever in American history is the story of Frederick Jones, an entrepreneur and inventor. He is responsible for creating the refrigerator, the most profound invention since the wheel, a race car that once beat an airplane, and a host of other accomplishments. Surely, he is a person worth mentioning in classrooms around the nation. Again, I must ask, why wasn't he mentioned? Was there an intent to mislead the nation and the world? Yes, to allow the truth to be known would have shattered the stereotype of ignorance placed upon African Americans perpetuated by society of that time in history. As we address these irregularities, we must emphasize this truth, both positive and negative. Also, memorialize the committed altruism of the Americans that epitomize all aspects of equality. Acknowledging the lives lost in the Civil War, the martyrs of the Civil Rights Movement, to the iconic phrase, Black Lives Matter. Now we must answer the question as to what gives Black lives value. Is it our historic contributions to society? Is it our athleticism? Is it our theatrics? Is it our role as political leaders? Or can we say Black Lives Matter just because of our humanity? Currently, the solidarity of our nation is once again threatened by an inherited hypocrisy upheld by systemic racism, an embarrassment to a country that is founded upon the principles of freedom and justice for all. The reluctancy to be candid has allowed the inhumane treatment of African Americans in the United States to continue for decades. As the unjust murders of African Americans by white officers are on the rise in our nation, can we speculate that the emotions that has caused this behavior is a learned response from generational conditioning? Can we compare these actions to the destruction of Black Wall Street, the bankruptcy of the Free Man's Bank, where the Treasury building now stands, the destruction of towns like Rosewood, or maybe the inhumane experiments at the Tuskegee Institute? Eldridge Cleaver once stated, "You do not have to teach people how to be human, you have to teach them how to stop being inhumane." As a nation, should we address these issues with religion, or should we use education to correct these immoralities? Maybe a combination of both. But realistically, there has not been an answer that has corrected these circumstances. So, all Americans must unite to defend against the cancerous ideology that divides our nation. It is not a matter of race, nor ethnicity, or division of class, but it is a fight for all who choose to uphold the liberties guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States. In order to form a more perfect union, all Americans must once again unite. The nation's path to change has not been without challenge. We celebrate MLK Day as a nation, but the past has become our guide into a more harmonious existence, fortified by the committed altruism of the masses from sea to shining sea. Because we are Americans, and our history is American history, not just Black history, as we struggle to be free.
Hello, I'm Claudia Rankin, the author most recently of Citizen and Just Us, An American Conversation. I'm honored to be a part of the Martin Luther King Jr. celebration today here at Minneapolis College. And I'm truly inspired by the unveiling of the college's Bridging the Equity Gap initiative. I'll begin by reading a short section from Just Us. The book is a call to Americans to have a clear-eyed conversation about how race and whiteness function in this country. It's a call for a much-needed reckoning with our history of double standards and tolerance for white supremacist domestic terrorism. Just Us is also my attempt to ask us to bring to bear the hard truths of our history on our daily interactions and conversations. This is the last section from Just Us. Universalized whiteness, that racial imaginary, lives in every moment. We have to be willing to think about this, despite spending most of our days not thinking at all. In most cases, we have already decided about everything and everyone. But real thinking, the affect theorist Lauren Ballant writes, interrupts the flow of consciousness with a new demand for scanning and focus. To be forced into thought is to begin to formulate the event of feeling historical in the present. She wants us to jam the machinery that makes the ordinary appear as a flow. Even as we exist as people in relation, people across the table from each other, people talking in a car, on a plane, by the water fountain, in detention camps, in prisons, at picnics, at work, next door, on trains, in waiting rooms, in classrooms, at bedsides, in taxis, on the subway, at the store, on the street, in the clinic, at the post office, at the DMV, or on Zoom, social distancing, wherever. One conversation has already occurred between you and me as our encounter newly unfolds. Default positions and pathways might already mean that what I imagined doesn't matter, given that I am a Black woman. What would white people have to graft onto their fantasies so they can treat as real the possibility of true change, true equality? In 2008 and 2012, people of color in the defined categories of Black, Asians, and Hispanics, leaving out Middle Eastern and Indigenous peoples to the category of other, managed to elect a Black president despite a majority of the white vote going to white candidates. Once the victory occurred, white people claimed it as a break in their racism, despite the fact that a white majority did not vote for a Black candidate in either election. But suddenly, falsely, it was the whites' possession and progression. What about Obama? I have heard again and again. When I pointed to the continuation of our white supremacist reality in this country. What about him? I've answered back before pulling up the voting percentages I keep on my phone. Reimagining agency is the conversation I want to have. How do all of us believe again in our inalienable rights? Agency is right there, and I'm willing it forward, anchored in unknowing. I yearn to rise out of the restlessness of my own forms of helplessness inside a structure that constricts possibilities. Let me ask you, or just tell me why, or better yet, how can we? But who is this we? Is it even possible to form a we? Is this even the question? E pluribus unum might have been the first national mistake. Is there a one that the rest of us should step out of the way of or map onto ourselves? And once that pledge is made, what are we citizens of? We, the people, are citizens of what? I won't say again the what that gives me pause, but I will quote Fred Moten here. The analysis of our murderer and of our murder is so we can see we are not murdered. We survive, and then as we catch a sudden glimpse of ourselves, we shudder, for we are shattered. Nothing survives. The nothingness we share is all that's real. That's what we come out to show. That showing is or ought to be our constant study. Appropriate that. Is it possible to live e pluribus unum? As a naturalized citizen, I am as connected to the ones who say, go back to where you come from, or send her back, as I am to the democratic process that names me an American citizen. And as unknowable as I am to anyone else, I forever remain in relation to everyone else. I am not a part of the one, but I am one. There is no beyond of citizenship. A stranger tells me he thought the goal was understanding himself as different from, but then he came to understand his sameness. He came to understand himself to be living also among other humans who are not white, living within a structure set up to disenfranchise those others. Arthur Jaffa said, as a Black person, you know whiteness and experience it. How do you contain that? And white people who you know and love. I might extend this to all persons who you know and love. Each one at a time. Our lives could enact a love of close readings of who we each are. The love of a newly formed, newly conceived one, made up of obscure but sensed and unnamed publics in a yet unimagined future. What I know is that an inchoate desire for a future other than the one that seems to be forming our days brings me to a seat around any table to lean forward, to hear, to respond, to await response from any other. Tell me something. One thing. The thing. Tell me that thing. The events of January 6th, the events of the last year, the events of the last 4 years, the events of the history of our democracy demonstrate the fact that we are citizens of a country where fabricated ideas regarding racial categories and the superiority of whiteness have extended control over everything from government to policing to education since the conception of this country. Whiteness. And here I mean the concept, not individual white people, has been weaponized against the very idea of democracy. We're at a moment when, as others act within a space that is morally bankrupt, we must commit to interconnection in the fight for racial justice. Stacey Abrams, for me, is a great example of someone who committed to leading the change to defeat voter suppression in Georgia. And in so doing, she has given the Biden-Harris administration a chance to work for all of us. So there is hope, but the hope comes with persistence and insistence and resistance. I think I'm to remind everyone that I'll be taking part in the town hall reading at 3 p.m. Central Time today. And I hope you will join me then to begin our conversation. Thank you.